Hello and welcome to Magic in the Noise. Today we're going to be talking about something very special that David has been developing. David?
Well, hello there to start off. But yes, I have been developing something that I call error correction protocol. And it's something that I want to show an example of so that I can kind of get the information out into the community and they can maybe start to work with it. I would call it maybe a very weak form of proof of concept for this particular type of error correction protocol.
So, can you tell me a little bit more about it? And are there different types?
Three types. So one type is that I have two levels or two different variations of error correcting protocol that I perform while I'm in session. And I've seen those work.
And that's
And
prior to feedback.
it's prior to feedback. Yeah, you're actually running the session. You can deploy this. You can see it change, the data change. And then when you get feedback, you realize like that was good data.
Nice.
That your first point of contact was maybe okay or was maybe wrong. It could be either one, and that you've just moved it closer to the goal by deploying that particular element within the session.
Wow.
And there's two levels of that, or two different variations of how to apply that. That's one category. The other category is if you want to, as an individual, prior to feedback, you've run your whole session, your session's done, you're ready to turn it in. You can still turn it in, right? But it just has to be done before feedback. You can actually go and review your work and identify areas where you have higher level of contact. And the reason that that's important is that now as a remote viewer, you can then have the opportunity to dive deeper into that particular element and produce more data if you want, more details.
So, these two are both prior to feedback. There are different layers. One of them is identifying the strength of your contact with the data. And the other one is more identifying the validity of the different data throughout the session. That's powerful. And so then what's the third way?
So the third way is the one that I'm going to expose, which to me is the least interesting one to me. The others I've already used and they work. This one works too, but I've only had small amounts of sampling with them, okay? But I've seen it work and I believe it's important and I do think the community should have an opportunity to work with it. And the third one is a category where you're actually allowing in a group setting this. So the first two are individual based, the third one is group based. In the case of the third category, you are basically taking the viewer and you're allowing them an opportunity to test their work and correlate it with somebody else's work while they are still blind.
That's amazing.
And this then potentially provides the analyst with a blind independent level of assessment on a subset of work correlating between two viewers.
This is very useful for targets where the tasker themselves might not have all the information yet to be able to see all the different links in the data, to be able to retask or to know which part to focus on.
Precisely. The value is for the analyst because in one scenario, they can take their analysis and look at what the viewer analyzed. And if they see that those two things match up for a given element, now the analyst has a higher level of confidence that their analysis is probably good. That's one way to utilize it. The other way for the analyst is that if they did not necessarily see that relationship and the viewer basically ties their work, some part of their work with another viewer's work, and the analyst goes and looks at that and is like, and they see the correlation, like you don't want to force it, right? But it's like, if it's obvious, it's like, oh my God, I didn't see that. Holy cow.
Yes.
Wow. And now you've got another element that you can fill in on your analysis that strengthens the overall analysis work. So it can be used for missed analysis or it can be used to corroborate analysis. And it's all blind. So the viewers doesn't know what's going on, right? This is still before feedback.
I mean, I think that's the power in it is that because the viewers are still blind, the tasker can use that to then refine the next tasking if you're doing a project. Um, do you have examples of this that you want to
Yeah,
share?
yes, I do. I have an example I want to share with people. So on one of the sessions that you worked, Sasha, I asked you to, so you'd done your session, and then I said, hey, I'm going to give you a new target ID, and I want you to pull some data on it. And I told you, just give me one page, right? Because most viewers are like, oh, I'll give you all this data. No, 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 no. I just want one simple page, like super quick, because I was just trying to understand, like, is there any pathing for this, right? And I'll give the target queue that I used as well for the comments or details for this video. You'll find the target queue there, or we'll put it up on screen real quick.
Yeah.
So I used a queue, and it wasn't necessarily as tight as I would like it, but it was sort of my first attempt at this. And I said, I've now given you a new target ID, just produce one page. That's all I want, right? Do you remember me asking you to do that?
Okay, I would like to, yes, I would like to address this because I didn't at the time. I wasn't sure what you were doing,
Yeah,
and you wanted one page, and I do 12, 13,
I
14
know.
page
I
sessions.
know. You were like, well, I can't do that. And I'm like, no, no, you can.
And I hadn't had my coffee yet. I was still blind from sleep. And so I remember doing this page and just being confused and being like, I don't know, this feels like garbage. And I didn't spend any time on trying to make it pretty. I was just like, I don't know what David is doing. Here's some garbage, messy little sketches. Send.
And that's exactly what I wanted because if this was to work, I should be able to quickly see correlations. And so the target queue was essentially between you and another viewer. I was asking you to correlate your most relevant points within your session work. And what I was expecting to see was just sort of like symbols, like gestures, like real high level, quick kind of stuff where you kind of have different elements from both people's session, your session and the other person's session that would be easy for me to just cross correlate essentially.
Like
And
a visual match, like.
yeah, like a little map that just kind of gives you some, like some of these are the other person's and some of them's yours. And then I would go and look to find those relationships and then see if it made sense, and it did. So the example I'm going to show on screen, the next visual, will be when I looked at your initial page that you submitted, which we've already shown. I looked at both people's sessions and I looked for correlating elements. And in this particular example, I quickly saw that one of the viewers had something that was this corkscrew kind of twisted around, kind of tangled sort of thing. And I saw the you had something similar,
Yes.
but it looked a little different. But in, but if you really look at it from a Gestalt kind of concept, they both have this, they're expressing the same information, right? But
Very
it
much
wasn't,
so, yes.
yeah, but it wasn't just that. I also looked at for each of those elements in both people's sessions, I looked for information that might correlate to the other. And that's the thing, so I didn't just take one thing. I tried to take multiple elements, right? And one of the elements was you both had the concept of threads or thready associated with each of those visual elements, which also had the same Gestalt kind of representation. And you also had the concept of light being important with those elements, both viewers. So when I saw that, I instantly knew that the probability was high that those particular elements from pages from both viewers were talking about the same thing. Now, under analysis, you might pick up that both of them are kind of like a corkscrew or they're threading, or you might, as an analyst, you might immediately see that, but some analysts might not see that. So
Yeah.
this is a way to quickly correlate potential, because again, you still have to bring in your own analysis, say, does that make sense? Because maybe it doesn't.
Yeah, I think it's powerful for because an analyst can't always know everything about every topic, and remote viewers can bring back obscure but really important information. And I do think that that's very powerful here. In this example, what I loved about it is in my session, this was from my Black Knight session, and I was touching on the concepts of DNA and DNA altering, manipulation, monitoring. And with my session alone, it's conceptual, it's hard to validate.
Right.
Whereas with this error correction protocol that pointed you to the other viewer's data, and the other viewer is a much more, what would you say, less conceptual, maybe more tangible remote viewer. And that link felt like it. it provided the step needed to be able to then accept the conceptual data that I was presenting along those lines. Does that make sense? Or
Yes, exactly. And that's the power of this particular approach is that I see it as error correction protocol for the analyst, but you're using the viewers to actually do the work for you, which maybe is cheating. But yeah. Now, one last thing in that first example that I want to point out, which I thought was fascinating. On your single sheet of paper, you had light, and underneath it you had laser light, and then you had like a kind of a big space, and you had blue and green. So I suspect you probably were clustering those two things, the two colors together, and these two things as separate things, right? But the thing that was fascinating is if you look straight across, you see light blue. Well, when you look at the other viewers' data that had the elements that correlated with the threading and all that, they had
yes.
light blue. So that, I mean, they wrote down the same thing. So I'm saying like that was another strong element for me that helped to link these two pieces of data between viewers together. Now, I'm going to move on to the second example. In the second example, from your single page that you produced, I looked at the concept of the star that came in, and also looked at you had like rays, like line rays that kind of went outward
Yeah.
lines. And then you also had even the light and the blue and all that still came in again. So when I was looking for visuals at first. So I was looking at the concept of a star or star type shape, that kind of thing. And when I looked at both of your works, I found it by looking at the lines that were coming out. I saw in one of your pages, you had these lines, three lines coming out from the human. And the human is, you've got them spread out like a star that's in a circle, which I thought was like, whoa, that's interesting. So then I went to the other person's work and I saw that they had a circle that was luminous, which you could maybe interpret as a star just from a visual perspective. They didn't label it as that. I'll be clear about that. But they had three lights. They had light, like what looked like lines basically coming out, and three, just like you had in your.
Three beams of
Yeah,
light.
yeah, yeah. And so they were picking up with the concept of light and these rays in both of your session work. And so it was pretty easy to take both those pages and see correlating elements because that person had a circle with three lines or rays coming, energy basically coming out, and then they had three people. So to me, I was like, whoa, like when I saw all that, I was like, this is too much correlating data, right? Now, maybe that would be obvious to most analysts that would look at it, but if it wasn't, you might take a second look and then all of a sudden it becomes obvious.
I think when you're dealing with remote viewers who are giving you 20 pages, or
Right.
right, or
Right.
if you have a large group of viewers, if you're analyzing 5 or 6 different sessions, that can be a time saver, and it can then you have that trust of saying, oh, I do have to pay attention to this, the 27th page of this person's session, and see what that information is.
Yes, I agree. So that covers kind of conceptually and some examples of how people in the community might actually deploy this and test it out for themselves to see if it makes sense to them. And they could take it much further than me. Like I would take it much further. I literally don't have the time. I have so many other things that have high value I have to prioritize, and this is one of the lower priority items. And I just simply don't want to get locked up and never get released to people so they don't know it's out there. So I'm just giving this away for free. I hope you guys appreciate it. Now, one last point.
Before you make your closing point, I do want to emphasize this idea again because we've come across it in multiple conversations, the importance of intent. And it's so easy to think that your intent, we all know it matters, but does it really matter? And this is such good evidence that yes, it really matters. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's very powerful to see that you could spin up a concept like this and have the intent and then the viewer produce. Again, this is, as far as I know, this has not been done before. But it was fascinating to see that right out of the gate, you were able to produce a result that I could obviously see the correlations in the information. I thought that was fascinating. So the intent is, yeah,
And it's important for me because I am leading the revolution against the replacement of human remote viewers with artificial intelligence. And so this is just another think tool or another example of why humans do and I think we'll always have that edge over AI because we can shape and guide our intent. It's not enough to just have it typed on the AI or have the AI self or auto generate the sentence. Our intent can flavor the data, can bring out these links, can do miraculous things. And I think part of the push towards replacing us with artificial intelligence is to make us ignorant of the true extent of the power of our intent. So I just wanted to add that in
Yeah,
there.
I understand. Down with Skynet. I agree.
Right?
I'm not pro Skynet. Just everybody, I'll just admit it right now.
We're gonna
Um,
have t-shirts and stickers like I think any day
just
now.
I'm just teasing, but anyways, yes, good points. And the last thing I just kind of want to get out real quick is another way that you can utilize this. I've seen it work. As a viewer, you are blind until you get feedback. Now, it will take a very skilled viewer with a very stable mind, so imagination does not get involved. But even if it does, you'll know because you won't get a usable result. Is that as a viewer in a group, you can take and make a column and put your name and look for key elements within your like just you could just pick 3 or 4 or 6 or 7 whatever you want to do, but you like draw or write down those elements within your session on one column that's associated with you. On the other column you have somebody else's name that's on your team, and when you go to do this you focus on the element within your session work, you kind of remember it, look at the visual or the information or the concept, whatever. And then you as a viewer just simply have the intent. If this correlates with something in that person's session, I'm going to go pull data on that. Now, for me, I do visual stuff. It's part of the protocols, right? I could use other stuff. Like if you use anything you want. For me, I could just pull a visual pretty easy. So I just go and wait and pull for any kind of visual, a gestalt. Well, you could even do ideograms. Doesn't matter, whatever. And I put that in the next column for that viewer, and I go down and correlate for everyone. Now, do I expect all of these to have correlations between viewers? No, I don't. But what I do expect is that if you do have something, if this is working for you and you've chosen something that both viewers have, the analyst will quickly see when they skim down through this list, it'll pop out for them, right? That's the intent. So this is, as a viewer, you can do this on your own is what I'm saying. If you're in a group, you could just do this for fun to see how accurately you are, track your progress, or you can start to improve this protocol.
Something just occurred to me. Even as a solo remote viewer, if you're working a project where you're doing multiple sessions and you just want a sense of, I have these two sessions, the data seems on the surface until I get feedback very different, and I just want to know what's the bridge. That's when I think this would be very powerful.
That's brilliant, Sasha. It's a good way to use it, right?
David, I want to thank you so much for sharing this with me and with the community. And I hope for the community, you know, two things. One, we are wanting to share freely as much as we can. Two, we desperately need to hire an editor. And so
Yeah.
so as much as we can, we're putting some things for free on YouTube. We are putting some things for free on our Patreon because Patreon allows that now. So do check out our Patreon, even if you don't want to pay to support us. But also, if you do want to pay to support us, it's not just to line our pockets. It's really going to be reinvested into this. We do need an editor,
Yeah.
little things like that. And so if you're excited to see what we're doing, what we're working on, and you just want to show us that support, we'd be very grateful.
Yeah. So let me make a point here to the audience so they understand the value of what would happen if this occurs. Sasha and I, we're capable of producing the content. We do we wear all the hats, right? Remote viewer, highly skilled, analyst, I mean, she's a better analyst than I am, so I'm weaker at that. So I'm going to admit that that's a little harder,
He's a
but
better
I'm getting there. She's teaching me. But the production, there's a lot of elements that are required to get this content to you. Now,
Yes.
the more people that sign up for Patreon, it would mean that we can hire an editor. If we hire an editor, that's probably it's like dozens of hours of time, but split between both of us that just would be eliminated on a single video.
Yes.
Well, if I have more, if I don't spend 6 hours on that, on each video we produce, let's say I spend 6 hours. I don't know what it is, but it's significant.
I'm
Then,
spending more than 6 hours.
yeah. So the point is that I will have more mental capacity and time to devote to the acceleration, expansion of cutting edge protocols. And I have others. I have a lot of insights, a lot of knowledge. Sasha and I have had a lot of discussions. I cannot get this information out fast enough. We cannot do it. So it's like what will happen is you'll see an explosion of more conversations on interesting topics that will allow you to have ideas, new ideas, hopefully, on the topic, but also tools and cutting edge remote viewing sessions.
Yes, we would like to be doing one remote viewing video a week where we're sharing a session that we worked on top of a weekly conversation and interviews with guests. But right now, that's just not doable because there are so many hats to wear.
Yeah.
And so yeah, do feel free to support us if you can. But if you can't, that's okay too.
Yes,
If you
that's
just
okay.
want to visit our Patreon and access the free content that we are putting through on that platform, that's wonderful. And leave comments and let's engage and let's have these conversations together.
Bye.
Hello, David. How are you today? Hello, stranger.